So this is actually something that we're going to build into our service layer. It's not actually part of it's going to modify the state, but when we save something, it's not really going to change the state at all, but it is going to save things to local storage. That's kind of a task. So I'm actually going to create two functions inside of my car service, and I'll call this save cars and load cars. Okay, and we'll write these out separately. But save cars, we want this to pull the information from the app state. So we'll do const cars equals app state cars. And we actually need to prepare these to be saved into our local storage. So if we actually open our console here, you can actually access the local storage by going to the application tab, and we can look at the local storage for localhost 8080. Now, I probably already have lots of stuff in here, but we can essentially see data that's stored to this website here, right? And lots of applications will store stuff to local storage or session storage. Session storage is a bit more short term, where local storage is a bit more long term. Session storage will essentially disappear when you close that browser, when you close that window, but local storage will persist essentially through browser loads and stuff like that. And so that's what we want. You don't store tons of information in local storage. You shouldn't be storing tons of information in local storage. That is something that we'll kind of approach next week, and how to really store information long term for your applications. But local storage is a great solution for a lot of things, and so that's why we are going to use it here. One thing about local storage that you have to know is that you can only save strings to local storage. That's it. You can only put in a string. We have very complex information, though, that we want to save. Like you just saw a second ago, I actually did save a lot of complex information in there. So you might be thinking, I think this guy's lying to me. I know I can save more than just strings to local storage, but you would be wrong if you think I'm lying. You can only save strings to local storage. However, there is something that we can do to essentially prepare this data to be a string that can be saved. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say const cars string equal JSON dot stringify cars. Okay, and then let's log this, and we'll do the car. We have string. Look at that. The car string. Cars string. Okay. Let's invoke save cars right after we create a car. Okay. Save cars. So right after the car gets created, we'll save cars. So essentially, if I fill this form in, and I don't know why this one doesn't fill in, I submit that, and I go and look at my console. We're going to ignore this warning about our hexadecimal color, but we can see the car string is this. Okay, JSON stringify is a special way or a special format to essentially take complex data, store it as a string that can then be pulled back out, right? So if I actually show you how we pull this out, we'll pull it out immediately afterwards. There is a JSON parse that essentially takes in JSON strings and transforms them back into objects. So as kind of this example right here, we have our car string. So we take all this data, we transform it into a string, and then you can immediately parse that data back out of the string, okay? So we don't want to do that in the save cars, okay? We want to create the string, and then we want to save it to local storage, okay? Something to keep in mind though, this JSON stringify is way different than if we were to just log cars to string. You may have seen this one before, right? To string pop up. What if I just did cars to string? You're gonna get a wildly different result. This is our JSON stringify. This is our cars to string. Object, 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 object. When the heck is this useful? I don't know, but this is what comes up. So do not toString your arrays or your objects. You want to JSON stringify them, okay? That is the thing that can be reversed. You cannot reverse the cars toString, okay? So we've stringified our data. It is now prepared to be saved to local storage. So we are going to say local storage set item. And this essentially takes in two things. It's going to take a key, essentially what are you saving this under, and a value, right? The key is there because we might want to save multiple items, cars, jobs, houses, pets, settings, user account, maybe, whatever. So we could potentially save multiple things to local storage for our application. So the key is, what are you saving? This is a string. I'm gonna say Greg's list cars. And then what are you saving? So where are you saving it? What do you call it? And then give me the actual data. And this is also a string. So we need to do cars string here, okay? So let's go put in my Toyota Tsunami again, make it lime green, submit. We'll see that car string go in. If I head over to my application as well, we will actually see that under the key, Greg's List Cars is this value of make Toyota. And if you ever hover over this value, this is the string literal. Your browser is able to then look at this string and parse it out for you here in this application tab to just visualize it for you so that you can potentially debug problems out, right? But if we want our application to use it, we will have to do something there, okay? But yeah, that data is now stored to our local storage. If I refresh this page, or if I close localhost, open localhost back up, and jump back over to my application here, we'll see that all that information is still here. All that information persists, okay? Now it's not gonna show up here just yet because even though we saved it into local storage, it's just sitting there. We need to pull the information back out of local storage, okay? So to pull information out of local storage, we're basically going to reverse this process, okay? So we're gonna actually say const cars string equals local storage get item. Set is to put things in, get is to take things out, and get item actually only takes in one thing, and that is the key that you saved something under, right? If I look at this, it says give me the key. So I saved it under Greg's List Cars. If I want to take it back out, I have to essentially say Greg's List Cars again, okay? And then we'll just log the car string, or maybe we'll put a little bit of floppy disk. Ooh, look at that. Load car. Boom, look at that. We're loading the car. Ooh, we should probably do the string on here. Load car string. Getting wild here, okay? And we probably want to load the cars from local storage the same time our page loads, okay? So you'll see that we're not getting this console log yet because it hasn't happened. So we probably want to say, hey, when the page loads, car service, load the cars. And so now we'll see the car controller loaded, we draw the cars, and then we load the cars. And it's all just one giant string right now, right? Because we are just getting the information out. Even though you can view it kind of here like data, when you pull that information out, you're pulling out a string. So we need to convert that data back into, we need to take it out of the string, right? So we're gonna say const cars data equals JSON parse cars string, and then we will log our, let's just do the car floppy disk, right? It's no longer string, it's just car data. Now if we go look at our, oh, we should probably include in that console log cars data like that. right? And so it's taking the string and it basically says, you have 4 cars: the Toyota Tsunami, the Mazda Miata, the Honda Civic, and the Volkswagen Bug, okay? There's something very important about these 4 cars though, okay? Give you a second to try and maybe figure it out. What is the problem with these cars? If you said nothing, you might be right. They actually stored a lot of the information about the cars perfectly. You might actually be looking at saying this price and this year is a number, these ones are strings. This is actually something that was not done with the local storage. That's something that's happening from the submit. We don't need to worry about that part actually, but these are objects. They are not cars, right? We kind of talked about when we create a car, right? What we pull out of the form essentially is an object that looks like a car, but it's not a car. The same thing happens when you save something to local storage and pull it back out again. Essentially, the process of stringifying data and parsing it back out, that data has been stripped of its class. None of these are cars yet. It's just data that looks like cars, right? That's just what happens. There's no way that you can actually save that class effectively into local storage, and that's fine. We don't need to. We just need to save the data, because what we can do is we can reclass those cars. Const cars equal cars data. We use map, okay? Map is an array method that essentially transforms every item in an array into, something else. So in this case, I want to say take all of the cars from car data. We'll call this the car OBJ or the car data, right? And I want to make a new car from the car data. And then let's log, nope, not load cars, log cars. So look at this transformation. We pull out a string. We transform it into an array of objects. And then we transform that array of objects into our cars. If I open one of these, there is that very important car template or card template that actually has all that information into it. I need that so that I can then draw it to the page. And what I'm essentially going to do on this last line is app state cars equals cars, right? So I have to retrieve data from local, convert data from string to object array, convert object array into car array, load cars into app state, okay? And you'll see now that when I load my page, the Toyota Tsunami is there, okay? It does take just half of a second, right? Those other 3 cars are just there before. Half of a second is even, exaggerated. It takes far less time to pull that information out. We could create another one here. Why don't we grab, sure, we've got this BMW car or something. Give me another, sure, copy image link. It's kind of a cool looking car, I guess. Everyone's gonna hate me. Fast, Speedster, 2011, price, 6,000, image URL. It's white, submit. See that show up? If I refresh my page, it stays there. Pretty rad, right? There is a few steps to this to make sure that you are doing it right. There's actually one more step that we want to do, because otherwise we could really mess some things up. But this is more or less kind of what we want to do, okay? Let's talk about how this can break. This works really, really well if you've saved cars before. If someone is loading the website for the very first time, they actually aren't going to have a local storage here. If I actually just hit this clear, or just the clear one, right, delete Craigslist cars, that's essentially loading this website for the very first time. I've never saved cars before. I'm just coming to this website for the very first time. We'll see that we got the 3 cars from the app state, but we'll also see that we ran into an error inside of our car service. It essentially tried to pull something out of local storage that wasn't there, parsed something that wasn't there, and then we tried to transform nothing, right? And that does not work. We can't take out nothing and parse nothing and transform nothing. That's just going to break the application. So we probably want to toss something in right before that transformation happens and basically say, like, if cars data is null, just go ahead and return, right? If no data, first load, stop the loading process, right? We don't actually need to load at that point. So we don't have any errors, and we'll just kind of stick with those 3 cars from the app state. That's totally fine. Let's bring my speedster back here. Oh no, I lost my tsunami, I think. That's okay, right? Bring that car in. What's another problem that could happen? Oh, well, my car form up here just lets me hit submit on it. And I can create all of these blank cars. That's not good. Probably clear this out again, right? And load this back up. I shouldn't be able to submit this form unless I actually fill in this data, right? So let's actually do a couple of things here. Let's fill in some of this data, but let's also maybe create an option so that they don't have to fill in all of the data. There's an alternate problem as well. If I go to like my favorite website, Khaled Ipsum, and I just copy this huge paragraph here, come back to Bootstrap, or come back to my website and just paste that in as the make, that is also valid for the make of my car. I probably don't want that to be valid, right? Clear my application out again so we can kind of start over. So our form is really lacking lots of validation on it, which is actually a very important part of user-created content. We don't want them to be able to post just whatever they want, because that could not only create issues for our website, but potentially in the future create issues for our other users. So these inputs can actually take in quite a few more attributes to essentially create that validation. One of the first ones that we might want is the required attribute. And this one is you just say required, right? If I go to submit this now, we get a little pop-up box that says, please fill out this field. Now, I really don't have to fill out anything too crazy here, right? I do have to put a URL in for that one, but then if I hit submit, I can still potentially put things in that maybe I shouldn't, or that are not necessarily valid. So we can kind of get into a few more things here. So like make, we can actually put a min length on the make. Maybe say, VW. I guess it would be 2. The make could be as small as 2 for like VW. So maybe we'll say 2, they put in VW. But we can also put in a max length. Let's say 15 characters. What is Volkswagen? How many characters is Volkswagen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so 15 is probably pretty generous for a max length for that. Our min length for our model can maybe be 5, with a max length of maybe 15 as well. Again, not a big car person. I'm not sure if that is enough. Our year, year 1, that doesn't make sense, right? So for our inputs of number type, we can actually say min. It's probably valid to say like for a car, the minimum allowed value is maybe like 1970, and that alone is probably pretty old. Actually, the first car is probably not even, what is the invention of the car, invention of line, what the heck? 1886? Dang, that was the first car. Sure. Well, why don't we go ahead and put that in as our minimum? 1886, right? That's a minimum allowed value there. And then we can do our max. So maybe we'll say 2025. Price. We could probably set the price to whatever we want, but we probably shouldn't be able to go negative. So this probably has a minimum length or min of 0, maybe a max of 100 million, maybe. That's pretty generous for a price there. The image URL required is probably best just for the image URL. And then color, we probably don't necessarily need to come up with a color, but because you can never not set a color with a color picker. But something you could do is you could actually start with a different value. And I think this just needs to be a hex code. So if you did something like FF0000, that would be red. FFFF should be yellow. FF00FF should be like purple. And then all Fs should be white. You could also very much just kind of go in here. If we wanted the defaults to be our neon green, we could make that value, 64E141. 64E141. Right, I'm gonna have that neon green be the starting color. And you can do that with, potentially any of these inputs. You can also put in placeholders. So you'd say something like Honda ... right? And that's kind of how you get that information in there. Placeholder, Speedster, totally a car model. Year might make sense to have a value. This year, let's start you out at a right year. Price value, why don't we start you out at $1, right? And maybe there's no image URL to start with in there, right? But this already kind of gets you in a pretty good place to make this form a little bit better. Let's do this. Let's make it so that that image URL is actually not required, okay? And let's show a way that you can actually come up with a default image. I'm actually going to close a lot of this out without someone having to actually have that big URL pop in there. I don't know what this car is. This is now going to be our default car. Ooh, actually, toy car. Ooh, this is a great little default image here. Why not? Okay. So something that we can actually do is you never provided us with a image. Here in our model, we can essentially default one for you. So what we could do is we could say, well, if there is no image URL, actually use this instead. So we can actually say the image URL of this car is going to be equal to the data image URL, or it'll be this. So if they never provide an image URL, we'll essentially take this one instead. And you can essentially do that with all of these things, like year, price, make, model, color. But we'll just do this one for the image here. We'll make the Mazda Tacoma 2024 price $1. We'll make it bright purple, and then we'll hit submit. We'll see that because that image URL was never a part of that form, it essentially defaulted back to what is here in our model. Now, I can't submit these other items because, those forms are required. If I hit like A, hit submit, it's going to pop up a little message that says, hey, you need a max, you need to go a little bit longer. If I type for a while and I keep typing, it actually cuts it off at that max length. My price here will never go below my minimum, and it'll never go above my, I think the numbers do work a little bit differently. If I try and VW bug, oh, it has to be 5. That one probably needs to be 3, but if I try and submit that now, it says, hey, it actually needs to be that. If I lessen this, it'll actually just shoot straight down to whatever that is. So now we got a green VW Beetle kind of taking the same image there. Super, super cool, okay? Right on. So that makes our form a little bit nicer, a little bit more user-friendly. But let's actually show how we can get rid of information too. Our AA -5 black -4 car, we should probably be able to erase this without having to go to the application data here inside of our local storage and erase everything. Probably be wise if there was maybe like a delete button kind of hidden here within the card. This is actually something that we can set up pretty nicely. I'm actually going to add this to my column 6 button. I'm going to use MDI button. MDI I delete forever. It's like this trash can with an X on it, which is really nice. Class BTN danger. Makes it kind of that red one. Rounded circle. That looks terrible. Let's just leave it as rounded. We'll just leave it as rounded. And something that I can actually do with just Bootstrap is I can make this column position relative. I can make the button position absolute and top 0. And maybe we'll do right 0. Is it not right? Is it end 0? It is. So now we kind of have this delete button kind of hanging out over here. Let's call this the delete button, because I want to do some more here, because I don't want this delete button to always be here, but let's make it work first, okay? So we'll come into our cars controller. We have draw cars, we have create car. Now it's time to delete car, okay? And log deleting something, right? We need to be able to know which car we're deleting. If I click on this button, I need to know that I'm deleting the Mazda Miata. If I click on this car, I need to know that I'm deleting the AA or whatever, right? So you might already be thinking, just based on what we've done in the past, cool, in my model, let's add an on click to this button. Oops, not on clock. On click for app, cars, controller, delete car. Put our little string in here with $ curly brackets. I need to essentially delete the car or this make, right? Or would I use this model? Or would I use this make, this model, this year, right? We're kind of running into a unique scenario here, right? Where now that there's user-generated content, we are likely going to have overlap between our information. Honda Civic. Sure, this one was totally also from 2008. This one's just blue, right? Submit. Sure, there's going to be minor things that are unique about each car, but now what? We have to like come up with some sort of situation and some sort of like combination of make, model, year, color, price, all this stuff to figure out which car you wanted to delete. It's kind of tricky now, right? I've got 2 Honda Civics, so if I say just delete Honda, which one was I talking about, right? If I just say delete the Civic, which one was I talking about? And even though I could potentially try and come up with some big combination of all of the data kind of conglomerated together, I still could run into the scenario of 2 users posting potentially the same car, right? Or much of the same car data. So we need something else. We need something that is guaranteed to be unique per car. So ideally, this is where we create a brand new thing like this .id, short for identifier. And we just need to make sure that this is something unique. A pretty quick way to do it is math.random, times like 10 million or something along those lines. If I were to ever look at cars from my app state, they now all have this super unique long ID, which is just like a totally random number or whatever along those lines, right? You could add a couple more zeros on here and wrap this entire thing in a math.round, right? So you don't have that. So now these IDs are, super, super random numbers. That's a very quick and dirty way to do it. There is obviously an extremely slim chance that those IDs will not be unique, since this is just a random number, and due to the way random numbers happen, there is an extremely, extremely slim chance that those are not unique. This could totally be used though for something unique. We do have another utility though that does create guaranteed unique identifiers inside this utility, and this is in a utility called generate ID. So this generates a 10 character long string that is guaranteed to be unique, essentially based off of like timestamps and other randomized things. So there is randomization to it, but it's also introducing like a timestamp element into it that kind of makes that always unique. So we can actually bring in this generate ID function, and you essentially just say this ID equals generate ID. So now if we look at each of these cars, we're going to get these strings that are all guaranteed to be unique. You will see that parts of them do look similar. Again, that's a piece of that timestamp kind of coming in, but these will always be unique. So now, even though it's not a piece of the car on the page, because we never have to show this to the user, right? We never have to show what that ID is. We have effectively created a unique piece of information about the car that we can use whenever we're trying to say, like, I'm doing something to this car in particular, right? So we're going to pass this ID through, okay? So now if I come back to our car controller, we're going to take in a car ID. We're deleting car ID. Now there is one small difference, right? Or one kind of like downside to these IDs. As soon as I click this delete button, it says deleting 66CF44B50AB, something along those lines, right? I don't really know which car I'm deleting. I can just probably assume that it's a car, right? If I click these different delete buttons, I'm getting different IDs. That's okay. It's probably safe at this moment to assume that I am deleting one of those different cars. And honestly, this isn't a piece of information that the user generally sees. This is something that we pass to the service to essentially figure out. Delete car, pass that car ID down, declare the method, jump over to the car service, move this down, okay? Very similar to if we were trying to, find something by its name, we can essentially use the ID in the same way. Car to delete equals app state cars find the car where the car ID is equal to the car ID, and then we will log trash can and then car to delete. So now we can kind of take that ID and see if we were able to get back the original one, right? So if I click this, we'll see that that's my Honda Civic model 2008. Very important that it is not this Honda Civic, right? So we should be able to see that inside is this blue car, price $1,000. This one's like $12,000. If I click on that, I get the Mazda Miata, Mazda Tacoma, the AA-5, things along those lines. It's cool. Okay, so I'm finding the correct car, but how do I actually get it out of the array now? Well, there's actually two ways that we can do this, but ideally we want to use the splice method. So we're going to say app state cars splice. Splice actually can take up to 3 arguments: a start, how many things to remove, and what to replace them with. That last one is optional. We do not have to actually replace it with anything. If we leave that third one out, then it effectively just removes items from a particular location inside of an array. The tricky thing is where inside that array, right? I found the car. Where was it, right? Where was the car? So I actually need to get the index of the car, not just the car's information. And we can actually do this in a couple ways. We'd say const index to remove equals app state cars index of car to delete. This actually gives us the index of the car to remove, right? So now we have the car to delete and index to remove. So if I hit the Mazda Miata, not only get the Mazda Miata there, but I also got 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have my VW Beetle, we'll see we get 1, so 0, 1. Click that one, I got 0, click that. So that gives me that index. Another way that you can actually get the index to remove is you can actually do app state cars find index. And essentially this find index is going to work just like our find, but it won't return the car back, it returns the index back. So those are two different ways that you can actually get that index out. If you do go with the find index, technically you don't need the car's find part. I kind of do like to pull the car out, and I'll kind of show you why in just like a second. But yeah, those are two different ways that you can actually pull that index back out. And I'll kind of stick with this one for now. I'm going to say index to remove. I'm removing one item, right? So if I click VW Beetle just disappeared. If I click AA minus 5, AA minus 5 disappeared. Now, if I refresh my page, they come back, right? I modified the array, it redrew to the page, but yeah, that car came back because it was loaded from local storage. So if I'm going to take something out of the array, and I want my local storage to reflect that, I probably need to then down here say this dot save cars. Information has been removed from my app state. I need you to now save that, okay? So if I get rid of AA again, that car is now gone. If I refresh my page, AA is actually gone. Let's get rid of the purple Mazda Tacoma here. That is gone. And as I refresh, it actually stays gone, okay? So that save cars can actually be a very important step, right? Especially when you refresh that page, you want that information to be gone.